As a minority shareholder in a UAE LLC, can I stop the majority from diluting my stake? The short answer is yes, you can. And this is because in practical terms in the UAE, for any company in the UAE, in order for one shareholder or another shareholder to vary any kind of ownership structure, there's a requirement of all shareholders signing on to that particular change. In other words, if you have two shareholders, even if you're a minority shareholder, even if you're only 5% shareholder and the other shareholder is 95%, if the majority shareholder wants to take away or take over your 5% shares, or wants to sell your shares or force you out, the only way in practical terms, for the shareholder to do that, or even sell some of his shares to someone else, to, let's say, a third party, or bring other investors. Any kind of change to the ownership structure of the company requires for all shareholders to add their signature. So, and that's, by the way, irrespective of what the MOA or the Memorandum of Association, Articles of Incorporation, the underlying corporate, the foundational documents of the company state. So that's in practical terms. So there are the company's laws that sort of set up a legal framework upon which various shareholders can potentially request for request for certain shareholders to step aside. But in practical terms, the only way to actually make this change happen by virtue of updating the shareholder certificates with the government entities, which, by the way, in the UAE, all companies and all the shares are registered with a particular government entity. It could be the Department of Economic Development, the mainland, or any of the free zones. So in order to effect the change at that level, the formal level, that's when the authority requires for all the shareholders to ultimately add their signature and consent to this change. So in practical terms, that's kind of where things are. Furthermore, just to kind of bolster that position is, let's say if your dispute ended up in court, the court would very rarely, at least in practice, very rarely force you out. So in most cases, what the court does is that ultimately the parties cannot agree, will just force the company into liquidation. And the idea of this is, when you have partners that are already sort of broken relationships, so how can you force one partner to force out one partner and allow the other partner to step into the shoes? So in most cases, the courts take a very pragmatic approach. So if the partnership is broken, then the partnership should be no more. And so that's why, I guess, the moral of the story is that, I guess, one, you're protected, but two, it benefits all shareholders to identify a mutually beneficial way forward, and therefore to be prepared for a compromise, because anything short of an ultimate amicable, so to speak, or voluntary sort of agreement between the parties, you will have to go to court, and if you go to court, those are the consequences.